Angela, what's on your mind? What you want to talk about today?
John F. Kelly, a different JFK, who is Donald Trump's former Department of Homeland Security Secretary and his former White House Chief of Staff, saying that it turns out he actually is a fascist.
I would love for us to dig into what the heck is fascism? What does it look like right now? Because I think some of us, have thrown the term around. Tiff, what's up?
I want to talk about what's happening, and that is Vice President Harris's town hall, former President Trump's interview with Joe Rogan, and these early voting numbers. And I mean, my question I have for you guys is, does anything make a difference at this point?
Whew. Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. Welcome home, y'all. This is episode counted 47 of Native Land Pod, where we give you our breakdown on all things politics and culture. Please help me welcome our my co-hosts, Tiffany Cross and Angela Rye. What's up, ladies?
Hey, Andrew.
And of course, I'm Andrew Gillum. Thank you for the introduction, Angela. Appreciate that. How y'all doing in your respective places?
Great.
It's gloom and doom right now in here. I'm in Seattle. It's just gray. It's not raining. It's just gray right now. It's turning into fall.
You could have been here.
I could not have been there, but I will see you this weekend shortly. I will see you tomorrow. Yeah.
Well, guess what? We should get into your question. Are you cool with kicking your question off first?
Yes, I think if I know correctly, there is a viewer who asked a question that's right on topic.
Let's hear it.
Land Pod, Kelly Michelle again, being greedy with another question. So there's been a lot of chatter in terms of the Harris campaign not investing enough into Black media. I know she has a lot of people to please, but I guess the question is, or the statement has been that it's been less than 1% that she has invested or they have invested into Black media in terms of marketing and advertising dollars. I know that she is doing and making a Herculean effort in terms of reaching everyone. Charlemagne, she's going on Fox. She's doing everything. They ask her to do it. She says, okay. But I guess the question again is, do you have any ideas on why there aren't any marketing or advertising dollars spent on Black media platforms?
All right. So I like this question because we've talked about this a bit on the podcast before, and I'll just revisit it for folks because this is not, if you haven't worked in politics, this isn't common knowledge. So I'm appreciative of the viewer who gets it, who understands. So there's a difference between earned media and paid media. And so Vice President Harris has certainly, to her point, made a Herculean effort with earned media. She did the Breakfast, or not the Breakfast Club, but she sat down for the interview with Charlemagne. She did Roland Martin. She's also done niche media markets and some smaller interviews. As I just talked about in the intro, she's doing the CNN town hall, which is not specific to Black media, but it certainly is relevant to what she's doing. She's participating in that. By the time you guys hear this, it will have already taken place, but it took place in Chester Township, Pennsylvania. And this, just so you guys know, is the same night that she and Trump were supposed to debate again. He, of course, declined. And so CNN offered her this slot. I think that she has, at a later effort, her campaign has started to put money in Black media. I think it's a fair criticism. I'd be curious what my co-hosts have to say. I think it's a fair criticism of a lot of these campaigns. And I'm not just going to say that to Vice President Harris, because this goes down ballot for Senate races. Where are you spending your dollars? Mm-hmm. And I remember us talking about this with them on the effort to go after those Nikki Haley voters early on. So it is a fair question, I think, to ask, well, why aren't we spending more dollars in Black media? My honest question at this point is, what more can Vice President Harris do? Even what more can Donald Trump do? I don't really care about him, but I just think at this point, it is already written. The outcome of this race, if you are undecided, I don't believe that there are too many undecided voters. There might be people deciding to vote, but even if you're deciding to vote, what are you basing your decision on at this point? It just feels like, yes, they should keep running and sprinting and doing everything. Yeah. But I don't know what's going to tilt the scales outside of a GOTV game. Like how many people show up in early voting and how many people show up on election day to cast ballots. That's the only thing that matters. I can't poll over polls, 15 different polls a day. I can't follow this, rotten media narrative that they just like to keep people tuned in. They get something out of people feeling angst. At this point, let's get it done. But Angela, Andrew, I know y'all may feel differently, so I'm curious if y'all think at this point that anything can change.
Angela, would love to hear you on the media buy, and then I love the question, Tiff. I get to it after Angela.
I do think that given the fact that the Harris campaign has raised over $1 billion in 3 months, that they certainly could spend a lot more money with Black-led organizations and with Black-led media. I think that, frankly, our good brother and friend Leonard's interview with Kamala Harris and the fact that it is now, as of today, over 35 billion social impressions demonstrate that Black-facing content and hosts can actually be a much better strategy for candidates and campaigns than what we normally see. I remember complaining, frankly, when Kamala Harris went to do the interview with Dana Bash on CNN, wondering who she was going to get, because the folks who are going to turn into that interview, for the most part, are attracted to and interested in political media. What is my point? I think that it has everything to do with where you buy media and where you participate in interviews. Those things can peacefully coexist, and they can go on Black-facing platforms. I'm saying Black-facing because Black-facing.
But I get it. I get what you're saying.
Some of them are not, like Breakfast Club is on iHeart. But Black Effect is a Black-owned network that iHeart is in a joint venture with. And so it makes sense that Breakfast Club airing that interview, Breakfast Club being on Black Effect and on iHeart, that actually can also build wealth for our communities. We have to pay attention to the fact that these seasons, and this is something that some white folks won't tell you, but this is the time of the year where people figure out ways to ensure their long-term longevity and viability through the campaign season. They spend a lot of money, and it's not just Black folks who figure out their survival during a campaign season. It is also white-facing platforms. So that's a roundabout way to say, I think they could do more. They have done better in the final weeks leading up to the election. But I do think they could do more, and she should. I also think that she should go on more conservative platforms, but I'll save that for another part of the conversation.
I want to hear your thoughts on that. If you want to save it, fine, but I am curious your thoughts.
Andrew punted to me for media. I'll come back around to that if time
I wanted you for both, but I will say, to your point, exclamation marking it, something like 70 to 80% of these budgets are going to be spent in media. Ad buys, commercials. 80% of $1 billion. And that's not to say what the outside groups are spending, particularly on the Trump side, how much money they have, they're just in the tank. Tiff, to your question, I think right now she's got to try to win every day. I think every single day it is about getting out there, being everywhere all the time. There's no such thing as oversaturation if you're Kamala Harris and Tim Walz at this point, because we needed to be at the forebrain of every single person, not the ones who follow political podcasts and media, not the ones who are reading the paper every day, not those who are sleepless because they are so anxious about the outcome of this election, but regular folks who are not tuning in at this level, who are getting their news largely through somebody's Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook feeds. They need to know that an election is approaching, and we ought to be trumpeting it like it's the second coming, right? Like this thing is going down, and you can vote right now. I'm not certain that there is going to be much shift in people's opinion around whether they're going to vote for her or vote for Trump. I think you're right; things are baked in. But what I do think is turnout is going to be everything. So right now, you'll see a lot of great historic numbers being posted for early voting in a lot of places that we're concerned about. But then on election day, Trump's folks come out and they wallop us. They wallop us on election day voting. We can't be beat like that on election day, which means every day we got to be voting. And then on election day, we've got to have mass turnout from those people who weren't sure they were going to vote, who have now determined that this election is important enough they're showing up. And Angela, I wanted to hear you on this one too. I just wanted you to address the media thing because you had more expertise.
Well, I don't know about that. You actually ran a campaign and you know exactly how much money was spent. Yeah. Ad buyers on the organizations and the corporations that got the ad buys, et cetera, et cetera.
That's right.
I think the other thing, I actually just want to get into the fascism conversation. So I'll demur.
You want to save your conservative, your thoughts about her going on conservative platforms are fascism?
No, I think I've been clear about what I think she should do with conservative platform. I just feel like at this point, I'm being a dead horse.
I'll say something.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah.
Well, then I'll say something. Can we play the Hassan Minhaj soundbite, because I think he encapsulates a large voting bloc that I find myself very frustrated with. Let's roll that bite.
I'm part of a generation of men that don't read but listen to podcasts. Terrifying. All my homies out here texting me alpha male memes. Just hard times make hard men. Hard men make good times. Good times make soft men. A society will never value its men until the wolves are at the door. I'm like, Sanjay, you're a software engineer. Shut the fuck up. Why are you texting me like you're Julius Caesar? Whatever, bro. Mamba mentality. Sanjay, you blew your knee out playing pickleball, and you're quoting Kobe Bryant.
First of all, I love Hassan Minhaj. I think he does such a great job of like a smart, funny humor. But this is kind of my challenge, and I think this kind of shifts us into the fascism conversation, because there are these pockets of men who are seduced by fascism. I know we'll talk about it from a global perspective, Andrew, and a historical perspective, but present day, I'm having challenges because, I said this to Andrew earlier on the phone. It feels like sometimes 90% of the people function off the intelligence of 10% of people. I say that because when I'm in debates with people, it's okay if you don't know. I don't know everything. I ask questions when I don't know. I'm curious. I go on a fact-finding mission. When people I have personally sent Vice President Harris's platform for Black men to several people. I have personally had conversations with people outside of the Black community on policy. I've even talked about them a few times on this show. And when the information is so readily available to you, it's not going to be spoon-fed to you on fucking TikTok. It's not going to be handed to you on a silver platter. Like, you do have to participate in this here democracy. And willful ignorance is a privilege. It's like somehow, like our history taught, we didn't have that privilege. Like, we had to be informed. We had to know what we were talking about to participate in the system. So I find myself increasingly frustrated with people who are like, no, I just choose to be ignorant. I know I have this stuff right in front of my face. Or be honest about, you're not ignorant, but you like the BS, the racism, the xenophobia, the misogyny that Trump espouses. Because he cannot beat her on policy. So curious y'all's thoughts.
Yeah, first of all, I love the satire here, and sometimes it's the best way out of serious conversation is to get people with a laugh first, because I do think the implications of what was said there, listening to podcasts, I mean that's at least an exaggerated form of hearing somebody's opinions or thoughts, and maybe news depending upon who you're hearing it from. But a lot of people are getting it from even less than that, a couple of seconds on a topic, arriving out of it as an expert. Right. But I do think what was being joked about, this hyper masculinity that Trump is espousing from the podium, is also showing up in these closing ads. Right. There's a reason why all over the country they got one line. Their one closing argument is about transgender folk. The whole thing has boiled down to that. And you've got folks out here now, a lot of men and masculine men, or maybe whatever that is, however you show up, running around here thinking they're going to get infected with being trans, being trans by looking or being near, or if they're on their kids' teams, and the truth is like, we're talking about the smallest percentage of people, period, in the world who are confronting unmitigated hate every single day, having to convince themselves that they're worth it to crawl out of bed and live, right? But this is who they're taking direct aim at, and there's a reason for it. They want to make this feel like it's so big, it's so everywhere, and your kids are next.
That's
so
how
that all of
fascism
these
begins.
folks, so all these folks end up, arriving at the polls, hyped up on something, because Trump told them that they were about to turn trans. I mean, it doesn't even make sense, but that's kind of what's happening here. I think it's unfortunate, and I think it's lowbrow, and I think he's swinging at emotion here, but emotion can be a very, very powerful motivator to voting.
I do want to say, y'all, I have a bone to pick, though, with Hassan Minhaj here. And that is for the people who listen to podcasts, please keep listening because we want to make sure
Right.
that you tune
Especially
in. We
this
welcome
one.
you home. We do not poo-poo those who want to listen to podcasts. And hopefully you will read as well. Hopefully our podcast inspires you to read and not to espouse conspiracy theories. But, you know, I may have one. I may actually have one. I think, you guys, that this whole idea of fascism is not something that just popped up with Donald Trump. I believe, as Harry Reid, God rest his soul, once said, that Donald Trump is the Republican Party's Frankenstein. And to that end, I don't know if General Kelly agrees with us on the Frankenstein piece, but I do think he agrees with us on fascism. So if we can roll that clip, that'd be good.
What do you think? Do you think he's a fascist?
Well, I'm looking at the definition of fascism. It's a far-right, authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kind of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America. You know, again, back to this issue of, democracy is complicated, messy to operate, probably the worst kind of government there is, except for all the other ones. I think Churchill once said that. And again, our Constitution, our founders built in to the Constitution and to the way our government operates, built in a lot of checks and balances, and didn't design the government to be streamlined and whatnot. So, but certainly the former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian. Admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist.
So I wanted to play that for all of the reasons that we know. Tiff, you were saying earlier on our production call that we do a lot of preaching to the choir. And so let's convene the church, because I think that it's important for us to talk about what fascism is. Of course, General Kelly in that clip runs down a definition. I'm curious to know what you all's definitions are and how this applies now. I definitely have some thoughts.
Yeah.
Well,
and
I
Angela,
think that
go
ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, if you wouldn't mind introducing who John Kelly is.
Oh, yeah.
Kelly.
Sorry. I did that at the top of the show. But just to reiterate, John F. Kelly, not to be confused with John F. Kennedy, was Donald Trump's former chief of staff from 2017 to 2019. Prior to serving in that role, he served as the Homeland Security Secretary for a whopping 6 months.
Yeah.
Yes. Indeed.
So I have a lot of challenges with John Kelly,
Sure.
but I find him coming out at this point interesting. So fascism, it comes from the rise of fascism. Even the word fascist comes from an Italian word. It's like it's fascist, but spelled differently. It sounds like I'm saying the same thing, but spelled differently. In my thoughts, I would say fascism is an idea of worshiping an authority figure. And that authority figure invokes a cult-like following, and they enforce their ideology through methods of violence and manipulation. Given that definition, I think that's what we are seeing. You form tight-knit communities. And of course, the United States remembers the rise of fascism. In our recent history, we can go back a lot further, but in our recent history, Mussolini, this is how they invented the word fascism. Mussolini carried these twin visions and became the prime minister of Italy in 1922. And he remains infamous to this day for his work. So, yeah, I agree with John Kelly. But I'll tell you, Angela, my challenge with all these never Trumpers and people who work for the Trump administration and people who quit on January 6th, you knew exactly who this man was on January 5th, 4th, 3rd. You knew exactly who this man was in 2016, 2015. We knew exactly who this man was in the 80s. Our community knew exactly who this man was in the 1970s. So again, I would go back to my point of willful ignorance, because a part of cultivating this culture of violence does come, I think, from, is nothing wrong. Obviously, we want people to continue to listen to these podcasts, but I love, Angela, that you said, but please be sure to read as well. We are not reporters. We're giving our opinion here. There is a whole separate entity of news outlets, actual news outlets, who are digging into stories. They're reporting things that happen, and we trust that you all can form your own opinions. We come here and exchange in healthy ideas and ideology about us. But even if somebody was saying, well, this is where I get my news from, I would encourage you, the three of us sit around and say, we want to talk about these three things. It's a lot more happening. So I think fascism rises in ignorance. The more informed populations are, the less likely populism is to rise. But Andrew, I want to hear, because I know you want to talk about Pinochet. I definitely wanted to hear your thoughts.
I guess for me, the reason why this is really resonant or important is we hear the term fascist and fascism thrown out a lot. And I think people sort of adopt it as maybe just a political insult. But it's not just a trading of barbs between people. You're a fascist and you're a socialist, and there's real meaning, there's real thought, there's real ideology that informs this. Tiffany, you were just saying how we knew who he was, we knew who he was, we knew who he was. That's right. But now he knows who we are. He knows that you can't put a General Kelly back in his cabinet. He knows the folks who went in under the intention that they could maybe guide the horse. Mm-hmm. Well, now this horse is Buck. He's not to be guided by anybody. He knows who his political foes are on the left and the right and so on and so forth. So he's not bringing them in. And that's why I think the urgency of this, when I hear Liz Cheney and also Kamala Harris and last night President Obama and so many other surrogates come out, this man, unguarded, unchecked, with a Supreme Court that looks pretty much prepared to rubber stamp whatever he does, is going to be out of control. And so the word, I guess, fascism takes on new meaning for all of us. If we view it through this aspect. One definition that I sort of adopted is, and I think many experts in mass political movement study now agree that fascism emphasizes nationalism, militarism, and the supremacy of a nation over an individual, with the exception of the fact that it promotes a cult of personality. Fascist regimes cultivate images of their leaders as great figures to be loved and admired. I think we see and we hear this all the time with interviews coming directly from Trump rallies. This model of government stands in contrast to liberal democracies. That's what we hold ourselves up as today. And as the framers put it, if we could keep it, liberal democracy supports individual rights, competitive elections, and political dissent. That's where we are today, where we appreciate those factors. But fascist regimes are revolutionary in nature. They advocate the overthrow of existing governments and persecution of their political enemies. These regimes are highly conservative in their championing of traditional values. And although fascist leaders typically claim to support every man, the everyday person, their regimes often align with powerful business interest. Does any of this resonate with the folks on the listening end of this? When you see Elon Musk going in his pocket, prepared to spend $1 million a day, and what I believe is an illegal scheme, but either way, $1 million a day, and then writing checks 3 times, $75 million a pop for Trump.
Is that legal? Even I've been having. I wanted to ask Angela about that.
No, I don't know that side of it.
Anybody can weigh in, but because Angela worked on Angela, I will tell y'all, is super aware and conscious of compliance. So when I heard that, I'm like, I don't even know how that's legal.
I sent it right to the Department of Justice. I'm not playing. I sent it right to the Department of Justice. Like you cannot buy or persuade people to vote a certain way. And even if you're saying you're encouraging registration, we know what he's doing based on even how he's shifting the algorithm on Twitter. Sure, Elon Musk is a part of what happens in a fascist society. But I think one of the most telling things that John Kelly said in that interview was centralized hypocrisy. centralized hypocrisy. It is not the unfolding of fascism now. It was the unfolding of fascism then. We saw fascism unfolding when he questioned Barack Obama's birth certificate and where he was born, right? We were a fascist society when they came out with that concept of alternative facts. It was a fascist society when this white man, because this is pertinent to the point, this white man could have 3 baby mothers, could go bankrupt God knows how many times, could have a loan from his father and still fumble the bag, could be indicted 91 times, reduced to 88 times. The judge who he appointed and was Senate confirmed throughout the case, and now she's being considered for attorney general. It was fascism when Donald Trump's new classified ad runs and it says wanted yes men only. That is fascism. It's fascism when it is religious nationalism and the Christian right says the only candidate of choice is Donald Trump because he espouses Christian principles, and they turn a blind eye to every bit of violence on January 6th. It was fascism when it was about ethnic nationalism and making America great again, and they hearken back to a time where Black people were harmed the greatest. We have a major problem on our hands, and it is that fascism began long ago, and folks are just realizing what it means.
Fascism began long ago, even before this Trump era. I mean, fascism came to the United States on the heels of Mussolini in the 1930s. It was so bad here that even the ACLU had to come out. Modest students of history, I'm sure you guys remember the brown shirts, the white shirts, the yellow shirts, and to the point where they ran out of shorts, and then it was like the black shorts group. But fascism has penetrated American society for almost a century now. So this has been rising slowly over the years. That's why I say when Black folks of all people, because we've been on the receiving end of it, know how to view it. And the way it was treated even then in the 1930s was like a joke, like Mussolini supporters, because it wasn't our government. Mussolini supporters were kind of like an inconvenience, and it got more and more intense and eventually became more violent. There's been a consistent rise of fascism in this country.
Well, the only exception I would take with its existence here in America is that it has not yet, to this point, it had not yet taken over the whole of institutions. At different levels of our society, there have been able to be checks and balances in the stages of fascism. I would agree that it has been long in the making. And I'll just state real quick what the 5 stages of fascism, according to political science researchers say. And 1 is emerging out of disillusionment. And we could all give examples to this. Number 2, establishing legitimacy as a political party. 3rd, gaining power via right-wing partnerships. 4th, using power to dominate institutions. This is the stage I think we would be at upon a second Trump administration. And 5th, implementing radical reforms. And these are reforms that over time take away civil liberties, take away civil rights, take away
choice.
Again, all of the fomenting that we've seen and that we're experiencing right now. It almost feels like it doesn't happen overnight. But y'all, we don't pay attention to the signs. We oftentimes don't pay attention to the signs as they are right here dangling in front of us. Until all of a sudden we wake up and then it feels like the world has ended.
I think we're well in it. And I hear your point that we're not all the way there, or it's right in front of us. But I would argue that there are some institutions that have already been corrupted, including the Supreme Court, which we've talked about on this show, including the House of Representatives that could not select a speaker because of it. Like, I think that we really...
And now he's held hostage.
I think that we really cannot get away from that. I think the other thing that we have to pay attention to, and this is why I agree with you, Tiff, that it was long before Trump, but he became the poster child, the singular face of it, the authoritarian ruler, the dictator rule, right? Like before that, it was the trifectas in state governments that Republicans were long pushing. Now, to be fair, in 2022, there were 17 states where Democrats had a trifecta, but there were 22 where Republicans had a trifecta, and 4 more where there were supermajorities, veto-proof majorities in those states. Those were by design and with intention, right? They pursued having these full full single party rules on the state level. That only helps a Donald Trump. Some of you at home may be saying, why? Well, there's a such thing as a constitutional convention. And if they ever want to amend the Constitution, they have to have 2/3 of the states agreeing with them to change or to add an amendment to the Constitution. This is by design, and it has been in play for a really long time. I wouldn't say since the 1920s and 30s, but I would say it's been by design for a long time since Reagan.
It has been since
no,
the
but I'm saying by design, we've seen shifts
right.
and then we've seen it go back. I'm saying by design on the Republican level with the Koch brothers, with Alec, with all of these things, at least since the 1980s with Reagan.
I will just say
but I would say
we
since
have
the
experienced
1930s,
at
post
least
the New Deal and post-war era.
So the whole advent of
like
fascism
this.
came out of the period between World War I
I'm
and
not
World War
confused
II.
about that. I'm saying that there's
I know
a
you're
different.
not. That's not.
We're not saying you're confused. I think you're making a point for the audience, Andrew.
Yeah, I am trying to make a point for the audience, which is simply to say there is a period under which fascism got its definition in its examples, which were obviously first through Mussolini and then through Hitler. But what I'm saying about the reason why I don't want people to believe that we have survived through this is that we're talking about, when you look at the examples of fascism at its extreme, in all parts of the world, and we've seen it in South America, we've seen it in obviously Europe, but you're talking about militaries that then become compliant to first a president who legally through liberal democracies comes into power, but then while they're in power, they change rules, laws, constitutions, implementing documents, so on and so forth, so that they extend the life of their term to forever until they die. They then get rid of constitutions and civil liberties. We then lose hold of our own personal rights, and it will come in the blink of an eye, y'all. Donald Trump has already told us when you vote, you don't have to worry about voting again. He's already said, I may just stay president, live there, right? Stay there for life. He's already told us, I'll be a dictator, but only on day one. He's already said that the enemies are enemies from within, and therefore I can, as the commander in chief, compel the U.S. military and the National Guard to intervene against my domestic enemies. That's not how democracies work. That is not how liberal democracies work. And so let's believe the man when he says a thing that he's going to do. Let's believe him, because now no guardrails, and already one of the institutions have fallen to him, the U.S. Supreme Court, and thereby the courts, rule of law, it's all in his pocket. So to me, the threat is so huge, and I just think that for those of us, I know we're not preaching to the choir, because we're all in the choir, we're all in this together. But we have to, I think, use the time between now and Election Day to move as many people as we possibly can to the polls who may not understand the strength of this threat, but know that something's not right. I just think we have to. This is the time that we've got to activate. When you ask Tiff what can change, only thing that can change is the force and the strength by which we all move people to the polls.
And to this
break.
break.
I think I was going to say what's got to change right now is the break. But I want to pick up on Angela's point on the other side, because I think Angela is 100% right. It's here. It's happening now. So what do we do about that? So we'll pick that up on the other side.
Former President Obama was back out and invoked the potential of sexism in his appeal to black men to support the vice president. Was it a mistake for the former president to say what he did? What was your assessment of what we heard from former President Obama?
I think that it's wonderful that President Obama is out hitting the trail for democracy, frankly. And what I think is a mistake is to let white folks escape the accountability that they must face for not showing up to save democracy themselves. Like, they want to get mad at presidential candidates, right, when they don't wear a flag lapel pin or they don't see you pledging allegiance to the flag. That's what they want to get upset about. Now, the face of patriotism to them looks like trying to tear down the Capitol in a terrorist attack on January 6, 2021. So the responsibility of saving democracy should be on the largest demographic in this country. That is white men and white women. So I wanted to play that for y'all, not because you aren't completely tired of hearing my voices and you can hear it right now, but just because I think it's been fascinating to me, speaking of fascism, the way this clip has been run. Now, listening to it on the back end, I can understand. I'm just trying to be fair. Listen, if they hear things from all sides. Maybe because I referenced January 6th, they thought I was calling for another insurrection. Maybe that's what they were doing. But that's not happening, especially because people who I love dearly, who are my professional family, work on Capitol Hill. So certainly I'm not calling for violence on Capitol Hill or anywhere else for that matter. But I'm fascinated to understand, y'all, how since we did CNN together promoting our Detroit live show, shout out to Atlanta, we will be there with you all on Friday, how in the world they got from my words, this church girl's words, on accountability, how that is violence. There have been, and Tiff made this point earlier on our production call too, it's not reasonable people who are making this point. But when I tell you one Republican tweeter posted it and all of the Republican rags, all of the papers, all of their blogs ran with the exact same thing, their discipline is on point, y'all. Shout out, a slow clap for y'all's discipline, but you're wrong and you know you're wrong. And so I wanted to just have a conversation with y'all briefly as we get out of fascism to like go into accountability and what accountability looks like to y'all. Because it looks very different to me than what has been espoused on these platforms. Like they know that's not what I meant. So I want to hear what y'all think accountability actually means.
Well, I mean, I obviously understood your point, Angela, about accountability. I think accountability is the child of responsibility. And I think we all have a responsibility to this here democracy. I think, this would happen every week on my show. And Angela, you're no stranger to this. Every time you're on TV, they clip it. Andrew, for sure, you don't check a lot of things. But I imagine if you checked your social media, Instagram, you'd be tagged in a lot of these right-wing things. So it seems so big to us because we have ourselves Google News alerted and we get it. But the truth is, this is a small sect of society. I think the people left on Twitter at this point, Twitter is not what it once was. So these right-wing these fringe outlets is a small group of people who are trying to drum up this thing. It becomes real, Angela, because when you're saying accountability and someone takes that a different way and they start attacking you personally and you start getting emails. I've gotten letters to my house before. I've gotten detail to my website about the detail in which ways they would rape me or what they would do to family members. And so you consume all these words and it's like, maybe it's a fringe outlet of people. Maybe it's only 5,000 people who read this, but the impact of that is very real.
Sure.
That is fascism. That is how fascism is 100% right here. And that's how it becomes violent. Reasonable people understood exactly, even if they disagreed, even if there were white people who said, well, I don't know about that. They can disagree. Reasonable people understood your point. Responsibility, accountability, like you all are willing to throw it all away to vote for this man. Don't show us no more sound bites of black men. Don't be doing no more round tables of black men talking about that. They don't represent anybody. They don't represent a large enough constituency because most black men are supporting Vice President Harris. Angela's point was, talk to conservative white people about how they're going to vote because they're the ones who voted across all socioeconomic background. They voted overwhelmingly for him in 2016 and again in 2020, and they appear to be poised to do that again. So I understood what you were saying, Angela. And I will tell you, I was in the fire one time, and Angela's been in the fire a lot, and we are two different people. So people, they literally had a headline of like Tiffany Cross said this, blah, blah, blah. And it was Angela's picture. On the cover of it. And so then I started getting tagged easily. Like Tiffany said, we got a whole white people count. I'm like, that was Angela. I agree. I echo my sister, but it was not me. But I understood what you were saying. And I'm also just sorry that you have to go through that because I know what that's like. I know you as a soldier, you good
I'm
with
not
it, but
saying
it's
that.
frustrating.
I really brought this up as an example and was hoping we could have a broader conversation about accountability, period, because I think that is a word that does mean something very different to some of these white folks. I'm not talking about even the fringe. I think when they hear accountability, just like when they hear power, sharing power with black people, sharing power with people of color is a terrifying concept to them because of how they've abused it historically. Accountability, one and the same. Facing accountability to a slaveholder was whipping your slave. right? That's not what accountability means to me. Andrew, I want to hear what you were going to say about accountability.
Well, I was just saying, your words were clear. You said the responsibility for saving democracy is to march themselves to the polls. I don't know what was violent about that. I don't know what was calling for violence about that. I thought it was a true statement that, quite frankly, if white men and white women were to give us the majority, give liberal democracy, give common sense, give what's right the majority of their votes, all would be over. All would be done, settled. But I think as we see, and we've all said in different ways on this show, different voters come to the polls with different motivations. Yeah. And if they are where they are, they're there for a reason. Yeah. They have decided to prioritize something else over what we believe is the priority, which is small d, democracy, and all the other things that we care about. And they've decided that maybe what is in their best interest is a white nationalist fascist as president who will protect their part of the earth. And I think that's unfortunate, short-sighted, and just like Rome never thought it would fall. Great Britain, once the superpower of the globe, thought it would never fall in its empire. Russia and its empires do fall. Yeah. And again, it's, we don't think it happens overnight, but in a blink of an eye, we look up.
But it does. I think that's the point Angela's making. It does not happen overnight. Like, we are crumbling now. We've been crumbling for centuries. I wanted to hear more about what you were saying, Angela, about, because I think that's such a key point. And feeds to Andrew's point about fascism. The point that you're making, why white people are afraid of that word accountability. And you were creating a wrinkle in time between that and enslavement and that and oppression and how white people have used power. I would love to make that point so it could be my own, but I want you to finish. I want you to finish what you were saying, because I think that's such a key point.
Yeah, I think that I see power differently, right? Like, I was raised in the house with an activist who taught us about the Rainbow Coalition, a la Reverend Jackson. And the fact that if we gain power and if we gain access, then we are gaining access for everyone. That's the point that our good friend Latasha Brown is always making. When I'm talking about accountability, it is in the tradition of the Black church. Accountability means you repent, you confess, you repent, you turn from your wicked ways, and you go in another direction, right? Like, to me, that isn't about being chastised, and it certainly isn't about violence. I don't like to kill spiders. I like to be trying to pick them up in napkins and throw them outside. Now, if it jump out the napkin, spider me and you have a problem, okay? But other than that, I really don't believe in violence. I don't want to be violent. I grew up in a nonviolent tradition. Now I believe in self-defense, but I don't know. I think that ultimately when they have to face the music on why they are hearing things in this way, it's because of their own experiences and their own ancestral memory and what they're carrying in their DNA. And they also have to face accountability for that. They got to come to terms with what that is and why. Therapy, y'all, go. I believe in it. I approve this message.
But also, like, the pain that we carry from it, just to acknowledge it, because you're not saying, none of us are saying like every white person is bad, every white person is doing something, but white people do benefit from a system that oppresses us largely. And we have to be careful not to equate classism and racism, because then I've been on panels with people who are like, I grew up poor and my family didn't have anything and I made it myself. It's like, yeah, you still had certain benefits. Like, most of us grew up poor in our community. Look at the wealth gap. Most of us came from nothing and built ourselves up. Our hurdles that we had to scale looked a lot different. The hurdles that we had to leap looked a lot different from there. There may be some commonality, but it still looked different. Andrew, I'm curious, because you keep saying like in the blink of an eye it happens. Do you think we are at like the line crossing? Like, we have crossed the line into fascism?
I think this is the election that will determine that. I don't disagree with you that we've had, again, if there's stages to this thing, if this thing happens, and I think the assault on facts was the beginning of it. The fact that we had a whole administration that tried to convince us that you were entitled to your own set of facts, that there's no common anything. There's no common truth. There's no common right. There's no common understanding. There's none of that. Dismiss with all of that. And when you dismiss, when you suspend with a free press and an arbiter of truth and non-truth, and you get to be that for yourselves, hold up, everybody. Because now you're telling me to go check a source. Why is that source the source to check? Why isn't mine the right source? Why isn't Fox News Bible? Why isn't what I listen to in the shows that I patronize? Why isn't that the fact? Why isn't that true? And so the getting rid of that, and I think we are at that stage. I don't think that there's shared belief between what's real and what isn't. The fact that Donald Trump went out and told people that FEMA was only for a certain group of people, and if you made this much and the government was taking your houses and all that, I mean, just flat out lies. But guess what? Those lies took flight amongst a group of people. The next thing I just want to say is on this point of, Angela mentioned Reverend Jackson and the political ideology that helped to shape her own framing, right? I think we have to acknowledge that there are other models and examples of how you deal with power, what you do to get it, and how you keep it. Yeah. There are other models that have been, I think, the majoritarian belief since the beginning of time, which is power is a limited supply, and that it must be harbored and held and kept to me. And if it's shared with anybody, that sharing means the loss of mine. So it's a zero-sum game. Whereas many of us were believed in a tradition that power is infinite. There is no limit to it. In fact, the more you give it, the more you get. Have you ever empowered somebody who you work with? Have you ever empowered an intern and said, "Why don't you go do this?" They don't. They use that as a responsibility to grow and an example, but they're still looking to you as a leader. You haven't lost anything. So, but if you believe that if you share power, and I think this is true of many of the folks who are bought up in the Eurocentric line of thinking of what power is that it's limited, and I've got to keep it with all my might. You will strip my fingers from it. Versus, let's be ubiquitous with it. Well, everybody gets some.
You know, one thing that we should do, we know that part of what's happened with fascism and the Teflon Don is that most of what is thrown at him doesn't stick, including 88 plus felony indictments. I would say, though, that got Giuliani, that was not his story. And so he is now having to face accountability. For what he's done. It is not a violent sense of accountability, but child, did he get God for all of his resources. Let's roll the clip of the woman who... Can we play what Giuliani said first? Okay. If you don't mind, because I want them to hear exactly what Giuliani said. Why he should be accountable, Tiff? Okay. Sounds like a great idea. Let's take this basics hooked on phonics class to the clip.
Of Ruby Freeman and Shay Freeman Moss and one other gentleman quite obviously surreptitiously passing around USB ports as if they're vials of heroin or cocaine. I mean, it's obvious to anyone who's a criminal investigator or prosecutor they are engaged in surreptitious illegal activity again that day. And that's a week ago, and they're still walking around Georgia lying. They should have been questioned already. Their places of work, their homes should have been searched for evidence of ballots, for evidence of USB ports, for evidence of voter fraud.
Before we get to this clip of Ruby Freeman, I just want to remind you all that man who tried to compare taking USB hard drives to vials of cocaine is also the man that has been disbarred over these false election claims that he's associated with the 2020 election and has been made to pay over $148 million in damages for destroying these women's lives. He is also being charged with a felony related to trying to get falsified documents related to Donald Trump's election results in Arizona. So Giuliani he's got some problems on his hands, but let's see how he's taken these problems to the wrong one. And he found out with accountability.
For now, I want people to understand this. Money will never solve all of my problems. I can never move back into the house that I called home. I will always have to be careful about where I go and who I choose to share my name with. I miss my home, I miss my neighbors, and I miss my name. I've heard some of you. Don't be sad for me. Don't waste your time being angry at those who did this to me and my daughter. We are more than conquerors. Pray for us as we continue to fight the good fight of faith.
When we say that democracy is built on the backs of Black people, particularly Black women, Ruby Freeman is the type of Black woman who has led the charge historically and for many centuries, preserving a democracy that in many times did not even support or look out for her. And Rudolph William Louis Giuliani is the poster child of what it looks like when white supremacy intersects with democracy and believes that democracy is only for the few. That is fascism, if nothing else. This man tried to file for bankruptcy the day after the judgment, the defamation suit judgment, where he would have had to fork over the cash to pay these women for the lies that he told about them, for the death threats they then faced, and for ruining their reputations and their ability to further uphold elections and the processes that they have spent their lives protecting for us. That's all I got to say about that.
Well, Black women are disproportionately election workers in Georgia. So Mrs. Freeman and Mrs. Freeman Moss, this wasn't the clip that we played, but there she was defiant. There, you know, she had seen some level of justice. But I just want to remind people that during the January 6th hearing where she actually testified, she was broken. Yeah. I mean, she was tearful as she recounted what she had gone through. And she's known as Lady Ruby. And she asked, do you know what it's like to have the president of the United States and his kind make you a target of them? You also, we didn't hear from Shay Moss, her daughter, but Shay Moss was saying, I'm my mother's only child. I have a child. I'm my grandmother's only grandchild. And they talked about not being able to leave and people confronting them. Shay Moss's phone kept ringing over and over and over and over because he was doxxed. They couldn't go out together. Like, they were the recipients of all types of threats. So I'm happy to see her like upbeat and getting something. But I have to say, I remember watching their testimony in real time. I mean, it was gripping. It was gripping to see these two Black women face a congressional hearing and detail for the United States government what they had gone through. And they both cried through their testimony. That is the result of fascism. Yeah. That is the result of violence. And those are the people, for everyone who is conflicted about how to vote. I don't believe y'all really exist, but if there are people out there who are still trying to decide between Trump and Vice President Harris, he empowered people to displace these two Black women who are bigger patriots than you.
Yeah. And you know, Tiffany, overcoming and coming through trauma, one day can be those teary, I can't put a word or a sentence together. And the next day can be, I can do this. This is strength. Thank you, Lord, for, bathing me in good sense and my health and my strength. And then the next day fall right back into that place when you think about the neighborhood you can no longer live in, or the alias name that you go by because you're terrified if they hear your real name, what might meet you on the other side of those words.
She was scared to order food.
That's right.
She couldn't because she didn't want to give her name. She couldn't even order food to her home.
So that, and they will live with that, as she said, no matter the amount of money they get, that stain they'll live with forever. Why? Because alternative facts have convinced a whole half of the country to a narrative that they'll never disbelieve. And they'll always look at these women as two who got something undeserving, something they didn't deserve for being Black. Probably. That's what they trumpet up in their minds to be. But this is another reason why I don't think you don't give power. You don't give more power to a person like Donald Trump and Giuliani who does with power what they did to these two women and countless others who we can't name. Right. And I loved to see the Central Park 5 file suit recently against Donald Trump.
Yeah. Leonard did too about sorry, not that that's the same thing, but they did too on the cease and desist for using.
That's
like,
it.
how do you,
Accountability.
how do
I
you
will
feel
tell
like you
you-
have the right to use somebody's words and twist them? How do you feel like you have the right to say that somebody cheated when they didn't on an election? How do you feel like you have the right to accuse these young people who have been exonerated of rape and you still out here? Like, what is wrong with
No,
y'all?
I have to tell you, Angela, that ad is playing in Atlanta
Nonstop.
On rotation.
on repeat,
I
like
told
back
y'all
to
that,
back
yeah.
to back to back to back to back.
I know.
And it's clear who they're targeting. I've only read it. I didn't go back and watch. How were his words taken out of context? So I've only read it, and in the context, you only read the quote. But what exactly was he saying?
Yeah, I think. Well, I know what he said repeatedly is the point was that he was watching the ad and he knew that it was like her words were taken out of context. This was Leonard and Envy talking. They knew that her words were taken out of context, and they were talking about how they were doing something else and listening and were like, "Dang, I don't want my taxpayer money going to that." Like they were saying how effective the ad was and problematic. Like because they heard another one and now they're using that. They spliced the original ad with them responding to the ad, if that makes sense.
But Vice President Harris, so this is just so people may not have seen that, but Vice President Harris was saying that she supported gender affirming care. And I think it wasn't the way they cut it. I think they were talking about prisons, but I think she was referencing people in ICE detention. I'm not being exact
That
here.
I don't
'cause
know.
I don't have to.
That
right.
part I don't
But
know.
it was something to that extent. And so Charlamagne and DJ Envy were saying if that is the case, they did not want their.
No, they
didn't support
They were
that.
saying that they knew that in that moment that they had cut a small portion of her answer in an interview and it was taken out of context. But because like you're focused on football, they're like, "Oh my God, I heard this," and I'm like,
Yeah,
"That's
it's effective.
It's effective." That's all they were saying. Like it was
Yeah.
effective,
Yeah.
but they made it seem like when you're like, "I don't want to do that." Like you're saying how you initially
Yeah.
responded, but they're saying that was lifted out of context because this wasn't even the point. They're like, they're doing a great job at targeting us because that almost worked on me.
But so I think we got to have a conversation about this at some point because that can't be the thing that's effective in our, it's like the trans community, and this is, it is ubiquitous here. Like even in osmosis, walking down the street, like people have so much to say about it. And I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but it is for sure less than 3% of society. Gender affirming care is not something that impacts all of these people, and they are making it their central ad. And I wish that was not an effective ad. I wish people could just look at that and say, who gives a shit? Like I'm worried about my mortgage. I'm worried about my
But that's
kids.
exactly
I'm worried
why
about
it's
things that
effective,
happen.
Tiff, because there are people.
I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what you have to say. But I'm making the point like that it should not be effective. Like that can't be the effective ad. Even if you're saying this is a big deal, we're essentially saying, well, yeah, if that was what she was saying, then yes, I would be mad that my tax dollars were going to pay for gender affirming care.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that right there is an issue.
But
like, do you know all the things that your tax dollars are paying for?
And I think that's the point. Like there are a ton of people who are frustrated about aid going to Ukraine, aid going to Israel, aid going to all these places when they're hurting. And so I think it's literally harping on a place like, you guys know you don't have the resources you once had, in part thanks to Donald Trump's tax credits, right? That did not help you. But there are all these things that are benefiting United States taxpayer dollars, and this is another one, and you're like, but when is it going to benefit me? So they're playing that up, and they use familiar faces in our community to justify that ad. But I think that there is a larger conversation to be held about where our taxpayer dollars are going, how they're being spent, and to ensure that the same thing, just like power should not be from a scarcity model, neither should our taxpayer dollars. We should be ensuring that Medicaid is not on the chopping block, that Medicare is not on the chopping block, that insulin, if Donald Trump comes back in office, is not going to skyrocket back up. There are a bunch of things that we need to be talking through, but the main thing that we need to understand is there's only one candidate in the race to ensure that your taxpayer dollars are treated with respect and that you are not hurting and in harm's way. And it wasn't just a STEMI check that ensured that you were not in harm's way. That is the larger conversation. They took one moment, though, of something where people are saying, I don't know if I want my taxpayer dollars to go to that, especially because the full thing was not, it wasn't. And even, man, I'm going to be honest with you. There are a lot of folks, church folks, folks in between that don't understand. There are people who have trans children who don't understand and don't want to support that. That is a really tough position to put people in when they don't see their taxpayer dollars even fully funding SNAP benefits, right? Like,
but I guess that's my issue, Angela, because it's like the ad they running are not talking about tax dollars going to Ukraine. The ads they're running are not talking about tax dollars going to anything but gender affirming care, because they decided that's the thing that we can tap into black men about. And if there are black men, I know there are black men. There are black people. I'm talking about this specific ad.
It is not just targeting black men. I promise you, it is.
I'm saying their intention. Whoever is benefiting from it, their intention with all that's fine. I'm looking at the imagery on and where these ads are being run. They're being run on during black shows.
Thursday night football.
Yes, they don't, because there's no place where only black people are tuning in. But that ad for sure is meant to target black men.
It's definitely against men.
It's men. It's men.
Definitely targeting men.
Well, they use black imagery. They have Trump surrounded by black men in the stills they use, and it is all over Atlanta. It's not all over D.C. It wasn't all over Detroit, but it's definitely all over Atlanta.
It absolutely.
I didn't see it as much in Detroit.
CNN in Detroit. Like, that's what I'm saying, Tiff.
Well, I think that's a national ad, but I'm saying in Atlanta, like billboards everywhere. But either way, that's, I guess, beside the point. I think the issue I'm saying is that cannot be the issue that gets us. It's like we're saying, we're going to shit on this group of people because we don't like that or we don't understand it. Or next is going to be the migrants, right? That's the discussion I think we need to have. And I don't know how to have it because I have it privately with people who I've heard say things. My glam team was saying something about the LGBTQ community, but it was focused on trans people. And I don't know, guys. I just think that can't be the thing that we let divide us. And it's not even a large enough statistic that it is impacting. Like our tax dollars, of all the things we pay for it, that's not even a big thing. And they're buying you with misinformation for cheap.
On welfare.
Correct.
But for Reagan, it was enough for the welfare queen to take hold and
Willie
be
Horton.
or Willie Horton But I think this campaign is being run on two totally different planes. I think Kamala Harris's effort is in large part appealing to the logic, the intellect, and the respect of the voters that they care about these issues that they say they care about: the economy, expanding opportunity, making sure that women have access to health and their own reproductive choice decisions. And then you got Donald Trump here running an ad that is strictly about grievance and emotion. And I think this is in some ways a battle between what is the aspirational of where we want to go as a country, and the other is completely an assault on culture, appealing to the emotions and the fears of people, stoking that grievance and stoking that fear. And I think the election results are pretty much going to be a contest between whether or not we're voting our future and aspiration or we're voting our fears and our otherizing or otherisms. And the truth is that both have been effective in elections. They have. Over the course of our lives, they've both been effective, and so this is going. I think to me that's the contest. Say it again.
Is one more effective than the other, in your opinion?
I mean, I love when I feel hopeful and aspired to, but I also know I lose sleep over things that cause me to be afraid or concerned, particularly when it comes to my children or my family.
And that's what they've always...
Is one more effective for you, Angela?
I think that it's not about what works for me or what works on me, because I come at this with a little bit of a bias, and my point of privilege is that I've worked in this. This is the only thing that I have worked in, right? Other than TV. And so what I can say is that it has been extraordinarily effective since the beginning of time. Fear works. Terrorizing people works. It forces people into doing the thing that they're reluctantly doing. And so, fear sadly has been a part of our political discourse, from Bill Clinton's Sister Soldier moment to Willie Horton to, Donald Trump. That was a Freudian slip. Ronald Reagan's war on drugs.
The black welfare queen from Reagan.
Crime is overriding our communities. People are saying that they're being impacted by crime, but crime rates are going down. But they still feel like they're seeing more carjackings and robbing and all of those things. So it's
Reagan also had an aspirational sense too, Angela.
Okay,
to your point,
make America great again, right?
It was make America great again, but we're the city upon a hill. We're the thing to be, the light, the shining beacon of the world. Let's get back to that. Obama, Kennedy, good examples of aspirations. We can turn the page. We can have hope.
That's a good point.
We can be better.
I'm not saying that
he
it
was
has
a great
never
communicator
worked, but I'm just
for
saying
a reason.
historically.
No, I'm saying they both do.
Nobody's disagreeing with you, Angela. I think Andrew's making a point, and I'm like, yes, that is a good through line because they were aspirational, and they didn't call him the great communicator for nothing, and that man won 49 states with that. So I think you're just talking about what's effective and what's not.
I think they both are effective, and I do think it matters the mood that people are in. If you're angry, you're mad about the price of this, and Donald Trump has told you who to blame for
That's it.
You're walking in there and you are voting one way. And
can I ask y'all a quick question? The UAW president came out this week and said that, let's be honest, we know a lot of our members are going to vote for Trump. The Democrats need to learn how to better frame messaging to the working class. I surmise that the white was silent in that. But do you all think that Democrats do have to improve their messaging, especially if y'all are saying fear works? Do Democrats need to be talking about policy, or is there fear on the other side to say you are taking us to a fascist government? How can they harness this messaging strategy, if it makes any difference at all, to their base?
Yeah, I think it's disingenuous to say that Democrats are not trying to also harp on fear. And by the way, harping on fear doesn't mean they're not legitimate fears, right? It just means that we're pointing them out. The focus on Project 2025 is a fear-based tactic. The focus on Donald Trump as a fascist is a fear-based tactic. The focus on him having control over all the courts and every level of government is a fear-based tactic. The focus on January 6th is a fear-based tactic. It doesn't mean that those things are not real, but they are harping on our greatest fears. On Donald Trump's side, focusing on migrants taking over the country is a fear-based tactic. I also think it's false. Focusing on the inability to have a fair election and therefore we should never have another election is a fear-based tactic. Also nuts. Let me stop doing this because I'm going to keep pointing out all the reasons why he lied.
I was going to say we could go on for hours. That is true.
And guess what? But the test is that I do believe the test is where they close. What do they want people to have on their minds as they are going to vote? Yeah. And I think all of us would say, probably without debate, that Donald Trump has made his bed in the fear column, that he is betting on the otherizing of Americans and your fear of what you don't have, and that person's to blame for it as the decision factor for you. And I think for Kamala, it's probably going to be a little bit of both. I think she's going to be reminding women about what they have at stake. I think she's going to be reminding those of us who are believers in democracy what we have at stake. But I also think she's saying, we can put an end to this mess. Yeah. We can turn the page right now to the kind of future that you and I and our children and our children's children want to walk into. And we'll see which is more effective at the end of the day. I have a belief, but we'll see.
Can we invoke some fear right now? These are your bites, Andrew, but I want to play them.
I just want to point out we at 108.
I know. It's time to wrap, but we can close the show. But this could be the way we close the show, as far as I'm concerned. I want people to hear. Well, this won't be the way we close the show. But I want y'all to hear. This is fear-based, but it is a reasonable, rational fear. Can we please play the 2 sound bites from Donald Trump from this week alone?
Under no circumstances, you are promising America tonight, you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Except
Look,
what?
He's going crazy. Except for day one.
Meaning?
I want to close the border and I want to drill.
That's not retribution. I'm gonna be, he keeps, we love this guy. He says, you're not gonna be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the border and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator, okay? That sounds to me like you're going back.
Trump knew exactly what he was saying about the violence and the retribution. He skipped over it and talked policy, but he knows exactly what was being done.
Because we don't know what that, except for day one, can encompass a lot of things. But let's take another look, because the interesting thing, and to be fair, I don't know if that was from this week, but for sure, recent history, this month.
Sure.
This election cycle.
Made another, exactly. Yeah. He made other comments, and the entire GOP came out and saying, oh, he didn't mean it. He didn't mean it. He didn't mean it. I want you all to hear in his own words who he considers an enemy. Take a listen.
That's an enemy from within. That is a threat to democracy. These are bad people. We have a lot of bad people. But when you look at Shifty Schiff and some of the others, they are, to me, the enemy from within. I think Nancy Pelosi is an enemy from within.
Well, he goes on to name Adam Schiff and other people.
He also goes on to say he would use the military.
Yes. Can we also point out this is after Nancy Pelosi's husband was damn near beat to death in her home? Like, this is insane. This man, he's targeted our friends. He's targeted, literally, recently targeted one of our friends after Sonny asked a question to Kamala Harris on The View. He went after Sonny. Mm-hmm. He went after Whoopi Goldberg. Like, I mean, this man
went after Joy. Went after Jamel.
Yeah, I was just thinking just a couple weeks ago.
Him.
You know, that was last week.
Right.
We have to stop excusing and letting Republicans get away with excusing that or reshaping what.
Ever.
I know we're not, but I mean,
the
when
media,
I say we,
Andrew,
I mean
the media.
It's not just the media. I'm talking about the royal we of all of us, which is he doesn't really mean it. He doesn't really mean it. It may not apply to anybody on this podcast.
I don't apply.
It may not apply to you listening in your own car. But it applies by and large to the royal we who keep thinking that there's a check on him, that he can't do what he wants to do. And by the way, he doesn't want to do what he said he wants to do anyway. Y'all are just exaggerating. That excuse, time out for it. The man is telling us in plain sight exactly what he wants to do, and I believe him.
We also,
and that's exactly why I don't believe he ought to get another shot at that.
We didn't play the clip of him talking about what would happen with funding from the Department of Education for schools that taught that this country was built at the hands of slaves and that it was on stolen land. He said that he would defund those schools. I think it's important for us to note that as well. That is fascism. To end it with the show, there, that is the point. Can we end on a happy note?
Can we talk about a mini pod and can we talk about the show?
Oh yeah, let's talk.
Are we gonna do a mini pod and then we need to talk about the show?
Okay,
let's get Hope and Change and mini pod.
Really?
Y'all want to talk about Hope and Change on the mini pod?
No, we could talk about. Well, we could.
I'm up for whatever y'all want to talk about. I don't know, Angela. What you got?
I don't know.
Okay, well, we don't know what we're going to talk about, so stay tuned.
Yeah, check this out.
It'll be a surprise. Tune into the mini pod to see what we're going to talk about. The mini pod drops every Monday.
Can I tell you guys something? I'm taking a point of personal privilege for my birthday weekend coming up. My birthday wish is that you all will join us in the ATL, shawty.
Yeah.
Because we will be live from the gathering spot on October 25th. It is Spell House homecoming weekend, and there's no better place to be than in a town hall conversation with Native Land Pod, where you are always welcome home. We are so close to this election. We want to ensure we are hearing your thoughts. We want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent. We could hear hope and change. We could hear fear and wrath. We want to hear all the things from you all at the gathering spot this Friday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern in Atlanta. ATL, shawty.
ATL.
I got people texting me during this whole podcast. People were texting me, how can I get tickets to come see you on Friday?
Tell them to go to nativelandpod.com and sign up.
Okay.
And before we close, guys, any reflections on Detroit? One, for me, thank you to our supporters who came out and sat down. Right. Anybody else?
I thank you. It was a good show. I am a little annoyed because Angela stole my CTA. But go ahead.
Did? What was it?
My CTA was going to be Angela's birthday is Saturday. Everybody join me in wishing her a happy birthday. She keeps saying the only thing she wants for her birthday is to win the election. And to do GOTV.
Thanks, Andrew.
We will obviously.
But we can do better than just winning the election.
We'll do better
for
than
your
winning.
birthday.
You know, I'm really.
We're going to make it decisive.
You guys I don't know. Maybe we talk about this on a podcast, but I'm like actually annoyed. I don't want anything. When I tell you I can't think of anything else, I want to knock on doors with my friends. I want to do phone banking. If we go out to eat for snacks, I want to talk to people in the restaurant. Like, I don't know if like as gloom and doom as I was like outside of Seattle today, I don't know if I am feeling like I really believe we can convince, Tiff. I believe we can convince some people to change their minds if they haven't turned in them doggone ballots yet. So I want y'all to come see us. Even if you disagree, I want you to come see us on Friday at the Gathering Spot. So my birthday wish from the audience is come see us at the Gathering Spot on 1025. My shout out is to one of our listeners who says she's a big fan from New Jersey and she came to Detroit to see the show and she was so glad she did. So we're so glad we got to meet you, sis. Forgive me for not knowing your name right now, but I'm gonna look it up and shout you out next week as well. So we are so grateful.
That was my favorite part.
We are so grateful.
That was my favorite part. We had a meet and greet before. If y'all saw our live, we were talking about that. After the show, Raps, Angela, you had to run because you were running to a flight.
Sorry, guys.
And then Angela popped up in a wardrobe change. She left and then came back in this cute little pink jogging suit.
You wanted me to be in my podcast clothes on a plane?
I don't know. I thought you left and I didn't know that you just went to I thought you left and went back to the hotel and everything.
It was 5
now
minutes.
That makes a lot more sense. I was like, where did she go and get back that fast? Okay, that makes sense. But I loved being able to come face to face with people, to hear what people like and, just meeting our listeners because we feel like we know y'all from y'all comments and your questions and we invite that. And I kept telling everybody, put it on video and send it to us. But that was honestly my favorite part. So if y'all come to the Gathering Spot on Friday, like we're not untouchable, like we'll mingle, we'll chat with you guys, we'll take your questions and hopefully we'll have time in the show. I don't know. I haven't seen the rundown, but hopefully we'll have time in the show to have some interactive conversations with you guys.
That was good too. The conversation with Black men, I feel like was honestly, you guys, I hate to be biased, but I think Detroit was my favorite podcast ever.
Oh,
really?
It was. It felt like we centered what we wanted to discuss and voices. It wasn't about somebody with a platform to me. It really was about hearing different perspectives and being engaged in a conversation. It felt like welcome home. It felt like a home kitchen table conversation. And I really, really enjoyed that. So thank y'all so much for what you do to facilitate this amazing space every week, Tiff and Andrew.
It's no diss to Detroit, but my favorite, to be honest, was Kim Blackwell's.
Oh, that was a
Miami.
good one too.
Yes, because it was interactive. We didn't have guests. Like they could hear us talk and they could talk with us. And everybody in that room had such wisdom to lay out and had such deep interpersonal thoughts and political strategy. Joteka delivered a sermon. Yeah, did. I just remember every comment. I'm like, man, I wanted to cut that entire episode for social media because all of it was so amazing. And I like it when it's less guests. I know the viewers like to have guests, but I like to have audience interact. I like to hear from our viewers. And I think our viewers want to hear what we have to say. And I like when they can stand up and say, I don't know, Tiffany, I disagree with that. Or I don't know, Angela, I might have a different thought. Or they always shout out, we love you, Andrew. We voted for you, Andrew.
They love AG. To that point.
I love all the episodes.
Andrew said none of them are my favorite. He got 3 kids.
I've enjoyed each of the interactions because they've all been different.
They have all been different.
Each of them have all been different and have offered something, I think, very special and unique to the listeners to be able to walk away from because they certainly have offered something different to me. But all of them different, and I love that part of it.
Well, can I just shout out one more thing? We had April Verrett on, who is the first Black woman president of SEIU ever. She joined us on Saturday in Detroit as well. Even being sick, she was like, I'm knocking doors. I'm gonna come talk to y'all. I'm gonna figure this out. That is a no limit soldier right there. So April, we see you. We're very grateful for your partnership.
Pulling
and
for you.
Yes, and we got your back for sure. So yes.
That's real. We should all be pulling for her. Because when they win, we all win.
Yeah.
Come on, SEIU.
Yes.
Get it done.
Yes, indeed.
But before we end the show, y'all, I want to remind everyone to please leave us a review and subscribe to Native Land Pod. As you know, we always say we're available on all platforms, YouTube, and obviously all the places you get your pods. New episodes drop every Thursday. You can also follow us on social media. We are Angela Rye, Tiffany Cross, And Andrew Gillum, welcome home, everybody. We've got just 12 days. 12 until Election Day.
Thank you for joining the natives. Intentional with the info on all of the latest. Rudy Giuliani and Cross connected to the statements that you leave on our socials. Thank you sincerely for the patience. Reason for your choice is clear. We're so grateful. Took the oath to execute roles. Yeah, faithful. Preserve, defend, and protect the truth, even if painful. Welcome home to all of the natives. We thank you.
Welcome home, y'all.
What's
Welcome
up,
home.
sis? Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.